It's been a celebration for more than 160 years, but only a federal holiday for a few. We're recognizing Juneteenth on today's Texas Standard.
Texas Standard is a production of KUT Austin, KERA North Texas, Houston Public Media, and Texas Public Radio in San Antonio.
I'm Laura Rice. Dallas's Opal Lee is known as the grandmother of Juneteenth for her efforts to get the holiday recognized on a national level. Today, we're sharing stories about Juneteenth celebrations and revisiting conversations that explore the Black Texan history and modern-day experience. We'll tell you about a National Park Service site in Texas that served as a refuge for enslaved people seeking freedom in Mexico. We'll remember the joy of a Black Rodeo in the 1970s, and we'll explore the ongoing role of Black-owned bookstores. That's today on the Texas Standard. No matter where you are, it's Texas Standard Time on this 19th day of June. I'm Laura Rice. So glad you could spend part of this holiday with us. 161 years ago today, Union General Gordon Granger delivered an announcement in Galveston that changed American history. The people are informed that in accordance with the proclamation from the Executive of the United States, all slaves are free. It began. Granger's news officially freed around 250,000 people who were still enslaved in Texas after the Civil War. The day commemorating this event is known as Juneteenth. It was made a national holiday in 2021, so today we wanted to celebrate the day by revisiting some of our favorite Juneteenth stories, as well as to share some memorable interviews that celebrate Black culture and identity in Texas. This first story takes a look at how the city of Galveston started a program where it hands out grants to organizations celebrating Juneteenth. The Texas Standard's Sean Saldana visited one of those groups, this time last year.
Right now, I am backstage at an opera house in Galveston talking with Diana Frazier about a sacred group ritual.
We eat at the snack table to get ready for the concert.
Frazier is a cellist with the Galveston Symphony Orchestra, which is about to put on its final show of the season.
We're about to play the Juneteenth celebration concert, and we're looking forward to playing lots of jazz, lots of ragtime. It's going to be a pretty cool concert.
For the past few years, the Galveston Symphony has celebrated Juneteenth with a concert, and this year's event began with what is sometimes referred to as the Black National Anthem. The song you are hearing now is called Lift Every Voice and Sing, and it originally started as a hymn written by NAACP leader James Weldon Johnson. It debuted in 1900, served as a rallying cry during the Civil Rights era, and today it's often performed as a way of acknowledging the resilience of Black Americans. This is the third annual Juneteenth concert, and to understand how this new tradition started, I sat down with one of the show's organizers.
There's so much history and cultural significance on this tiny island that's really important to our national history.
Christina LeBlanc is executive director of the Galveston Symphony, and she explained to me that this event was only possible with money given to them by the city of Galveston.
We received a $20,000 grant this year, which is amazing. We were incredibly grateful to them, and it's allowed us to be able to advertise, throughout the state.
In the past few years, Galveston has used money from its hotel occupancy tax to give out nearly $500,000 to various organizations as a way of celebrating Black history and driving tourism to the island. This money has been used to fund dances, poetry sessions, stage plays, and orchestra concerts.
I don't have much else that I know how to share, and that's how I feel with this orchestra. Even if it means staying up late some nights, it's worth it because the people of Galveston are worth it.
All the pieces performed for this event were written by Black composers, like this song, which is called Galveston Survives. It It was composed by a woman named Isola Collins, whose family had lived in Galveston since 1865.
My great-great-grandparents were enslaved right across Galveston Bay and Bolivar, and they came here when they were emancipated for a better life and made their home here.
June Collins Pulliam is the daughter of Isola Collins, and she explained that her mother composed this song not just to capture the struggle for equality, but also the resilience of Galveston, which in 1900 was leveled by a hurricane that killed more than 6,000 people.
So much of what her piece of music reflects is Galveston overcoming. So it was, in her words, a reflection of those types of things that Galveston has dealt with and continue to survive and as much as possible thrive through.
Isola Collins also founded an organization called the Galveston Heritage Chorale, a group that sings and preserves African American spirituals. On the day of the concert, they performed alongside the Galveston Symphony.
Keep your lamps trimmed and burning. Keep your lamps trimmed and burning.
These are songs of joy, songs of sorrow, because the enslaved people could not express themselves through other forms of communication.
Melissa Deitman is a Galveston native, a high school choir director, and the conductor of the Heritage Chorale. And when I sat down to interview her, she told me about her favorite song they performed that day. It's called I Wanna Die Easy.
I absolutely love this piece. It is a testament of when you get to that point in your life and God calls you home.
Would you be able to sing part of this right now, or is this too much pressure with the mic in front of you?
I could sing a little bit of it.
Yeah, go for it.
I wanna die easy when I die. I wanna die.
Juneteenth is a holiday that will forever be tied to the institution of slavery. But the point of this concert was not to fixate on the historical struggles of Black people. The goal was to highlight their ongoing contributions to American culture, which is why the final song of the day was written just a few years ago. This song is called Yola Jazz Suite, and it was composed by a man named Charlie Harrison, who has served as director of the UCLA Jazz Orchestra since 2004. At the end of the concert, it played well for the audience. There is not one exact day that marks the end of slavery in America. The Emancipation Proclamation went into effect on January 1st, the Civil War ended on April 9th, and the constitutional amendment abolishing slavery was adopted on December 6th. But none of those dates are a federal holiday commemorating the end of slavery. Juneteenth is. It started on the Texas Gulf Coast, but has since been adopted by the entire nation. From Galveston, I'm Sean Saldana for the Texas Standard.
Back in 2020, Michael Hurd wrote an essay for Texas Highways magazine about how his understanding of Juneteenth evolved over the course of his life. Hurd was the director of the Texas Institute for the Preservation of History and Culture at Prairie View A&M University. He's since retired, but David Brown spoke to him back then about his memories.
You begin this essay by writing about what you remember about the Juneteenth celebrations you attended as a child. Share some of those memories with us here, if you don't mind.
Well, growing up in southeast Houston, my family would go on this, we called it a picnic, out to this farm, actually near Prairie View, and spend the day celebrating with our friends and our parents' friends, just having a feast of all kinds of wonderful soul food, and us kids running around and playing games. And we never really knew, as children, we never really got the significance fully of what that day was, but just that it was a wonderful day to be with our friends.
Why do you think that you didn't fully understand its significance until later in life?
Well, we really didn't get a lot of Black history in high school, back in the day, back in the '60s, and so we really didn't have the understanding of a lot of what Black culture was about and that sort of thing. We knew there were certain things you did, but we didn't always have a grasp of the understanding, so we didn't get taught that in high school, and we really didn't have a lot of conversations as a family back then about those kinds of legacies and histories and things that we should be aware of. So there was just, a lack of conversation back then.
Well, what was the process by which you came to better understand Juneteenth as an adult?
Well, for me, it was self-education. And a lot of what I got came from Black publications, Black newspapers and magazines like Ebony and Jet magazines, the Houston Forward Time newspaper, the Houston Informer, the Chicago Defender, and so forth. They would have these little factoids, these like, do you know? And it would highlight people and events throughout Black history. And for me, as I started to research Black history, I kept coming across all of these, why don't I know this moment? I had a lot of those. And so it was just my self-educating myself about Black history and what Juneteenth really meant.
Well, now part of your story discusses how Juneteenth itself has changed over time. I mean, from a pure celebration to a kind of a launching pad for political ambitions from time to time to something with perhaps a more commercial feel. I wonder, do you see the day itself as having changed for you at all with time and perspective?
Not really for me. I would say as a child, we just went to this big picnic, but as an adult, I would go to I would attend programs and festivals and there would be, job fairs, there would be parades and marches and that sort of thing. So as it took on more of a community-wide, festival, I would participate in that regard. So, and the celebrations have gotten a lot more diverse, and I'm really happy to see that.
Michael Hurd is the director of the Texas Institute for the Preservation of History and Culture at Prairie View A&M University. Professor, thanks so much for speaking with us.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on.
More of Texas Standard's celebration of Juneteenth is coming up.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Texas Casa. For a child in foster care, small moments today can have a big impact tomorrow. More on how lending time and support can help make a difference at becomeacasa.org. Support for Texas Standard comes from UT's Center for Professional Education, helping to guide professional growth every step of the way, with courses designed to improve professional skills, earn credentials, and make a career change. Details at professionaled.utexas.edu.
This is the Texas Standard. I'm Laura Rice. Stories are more than just entertaining tales with characters and narratives. They are all, in their own ways, accounts of people's experiences. They make emotional connections and help people understand or relate to others in a deeper and meaningful way. For generations of Black Texans, stories have often been conveyed as part of a rich oral tradition that connect people to the past. But those stories, passed down through generations, have seldom been captured in print. After slavery was abolished, many Black families settled in Texas and began buying land to start farms, open churches, and build schools. Back in 2023, the nonprofit organization Remembering Black Dallas published a book that traces the history of that time. It's called Our Stories, Black Families in Early Dallas. David Brown spoke with the book's co-editor, Judith Garrett Segura.
Could you tell us a little bit about George Keaton Jr., who passed away in December, an editor, historian, activist, and part of this project, right?
Yes. I first met George Keaton in 2019 when I was conducting research myself on early Dallas history. And he had just formed in 2015, Remembering Black Dallas. And I learned right away that just in his head, he knew everything I needed to know. He became my teacher, my inspiration, and he gave me what you might call a cultural education that I didn't even know I needed. So I've started working with him as a volunteer for his organization, and we ultimately decided to do this book together.
As I understand it, he actually traced his own personal lineage to some of the first Black families to settle in Dallas, right?
That's right. In fact, both his great-great-grandmother and great-great-grandfather had been brought to Texas as enslaved people by different farmers who were moving here, and they met each other in Dallas and formed a family, and the family has become really well known and very prosperous over time in Dallas in the Black community, but not so well known at large. And he really wanted to be sure their story was read and wanted it in the public record, along with that of other families, a number of which had been brought here in similar circumstances as enslaved people and who, in some cases, were children at the time.
How were stories collected for this book? I mean, was there a call out to families or what exactly?
Well, there was a call out to families in 1984.
Oh, my gosh.
By a predecessor organization called Remembering Black Dallas. And 67 stories were collected and ultimately put into little paperback catalogs to go along with exhibitions being put on during the 80s that were primarily for the descendants of those families who got copies of those little booklets. But they never were published publicly and never made available at large. But George had copies of these books, and that's where our inspiration came from, that we needed to make these stories part of the permanent record of Texas history.
Are there specific stories that stand out to you, so maybe something that comes immediately to mind when I ask the question?
Well, several families came as enslaved children, as I said, and the one in particular who's most well known in Dallas at this time was Anderson Bonner, who was a child who was brought here with an enslaved widow who had inherited her husband's chattel property. And ultimately, he became one of the largest landholders in northeast Dallas, property that included all of what is now Medical City, Dallas, and all along the White Rock Trail, the White Rock Creek in northwest Dallas. He was a brilliant businessman who never learned to read, so all of his deeds, of which there are a great many, and all of his property contracts and documents are signed with his ex. But he was brilliant. And his descendants are still very much involved in Dallas life and recently gathered to honor him at Anderson Bonner Park in Dallas.
You make a note that even though there is acknowledgement of the hardships, the atrocities that many of these settlers in Dallas faced, that the storytellers in this book focus on the triumphs over adversity and the successes achieved against the odds. Could you say more about that?
Yes. The most touching thing about reading these stories is that they record how a family with 19 children sent all of them to college, for example.
19 children.
Yes. And, or another family where all of the children became school teachers, or others where generations of lawyers grew out of this family. And these are the stories that, in particular, those of us who were white people don't know. We don't know about the early triumphs because those things were never published. But this is a book of such cultural enlightenment that my aim, and George and I were, we were open about this. My aim is to make this available for white readers who have no idea about how rich this culture was and whose understanding of our culture in Texas in particular, because these are all Texas stories, is going to change. It changes your heart, to read these stories.
I was going to say, I bet, Judith, when you drive around Dallas now, you see the city in a completely different way.
Absolutely. And I have a map in the book which shows where the main communities were. And at some of the readings that I've done, people in the audience say, "Oh my God, I had no idea I live on that street." About Turner Way, for example, and other names that they just had no connections about why their street was named what it was. And so I'm confident it's opening hearts of a lot of people who don't consider Black history of interest to them. And I've been concerned from the very beginning that my representing the book without George beside me, we only had a chance to do one book talk, but I'm concerned that I'm not viewed as appropriating somebody else's story, And George had no problem with my being his 100% partner in this. As I said, we became just best friends. But he died within months, actually within weeks of a diagnosis, and after only one book talk. And so I've been careful and treading lightly and mostly just trying to make it clear that my aim is to educate my race about George's race. And I don't know if I made that clear or...
well, you just did. If you didn't before, you certainly did. George Keaton Jr., we mentioned him earlier, the late editor, historian, and activist, started this project off years ago, and it is now coming together as part of a new book called Our Stories, Black Families in Early Dallas. We've been speaking with Judith Garrett Segura, who's co-editor of the book, Our Stories, Black Families in Early Dallas. We're going to have a link to more at texasstandard.org. And Judith, thanks so much for joining us on the Texas Standard.
It was my great pleasure.
Support for Texas Standard comes from UT San Antonio, providing education and research for communities across Texas, with a focus on student success and workforce development. The University of Ambition, utsa.edu.
From the Texas Newsroom, I'm Matt Harrop. Texas state legislative investigators say Camp Mystic was not prepared for last year's deadly July 4th flooding that killed 25 campers and 2 counselors. The Texas Newsroom's Blaze Gainey reports.
A 115-page investigative report found Camp Mystic had no written emergency plans, struggled with evacuations, and faced communication breakdowns as floodwaters rose. Investigator Casey Garrett told lawmakers staff members were left searching for direction during the crisis.
The senior counselor in Cozy Corner said they were on the walkie-talkie. What do we do? What do we do? And it went unanswered.
Lawmakers have adopted the report and say its findings could shape future legislation, though some argue Texas has already addressed many of the problems through youth camp safety laws passed last year. I'm Blaze Gainey in Austin.
Texas Public Radio's David Martin Davies says military officials are scrambling to contain a flu outbreak at Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio.
Military medical personnel are isolating and treating trainees who show symptoms and monitoring those who may have been exposed. 2 months ago, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth ended mandatory influenza vaccinations for military personnel.
At least 159 service members have tested positive and 2 recruits have been hospitalized. The Dallas County Medical Examiner has pronounced the death in ICE custody of a 41-year-old Afghan asylum seeker to be an accident. Houston Public Media's Andrew Schneider says the county announced the finding on its website yesterday, more than 90 days after the man's death.
Mohammed Nazir Pakhtiwal served alongside U.S. Army Special Forces in Afghanistan for more than a decade. He and his family were evacuated to the U.S. and resettled in Texas after Kabul fell to the Taliban in 2021. On March 13th, he was seized outside his home by ICE agents. He was taken to Dallas Parkland Hospital that evening with chest pains and shortness of breath. According to ICE, his tongue swelled the next morning. Hospital staff administered epinephrine and attempted life-saving measures, but he died. Pakhtiwal's brother, widow, and children are still baffled, saying in a statement, We do not understand. What kind of accident takes a healthy 41-year-old man who is in the care of the United States government? I'm Andrew Schneider in Houston.
And a judge has ordered right-wing activist Jake Long to stay out of Texas unless he's meeting with his attorneys or has a scheduled court appointment. He's charged with making a terroristic threat after appearing at the Carmelo Anthony stabbing trial in Frisco. I'm Matt Harrop in the Texas newsroom.
You're listening to statewide news from public radio stations across Texas. This coverage is only possible because of support from listeners like you. You can help sustain and grow Texas news coverage by donating to your local public radio station today.
It's the Texas Standard. I'm Laura Rice. And on this Juneteenth holiday, we're looking back to some of the stories we've covered about the holiday and about the people and places that shaped Black history and culture in Texas. In 1857, a man named Nathaniel Jackson moved his family from Alabama to a ranch near the banks of the Rio Grande in present-day Hidalgo County. Jackson was white. His wife, Matilda Hicks, was Black. Jackson lived the rest of his life on the ranch until his death in 1867. During that time, he and his family grew vegetables and raised livestock on their land. But that's not all. Their place was also a refuge for runaway enslaved people on their way to Mexico. The National Park Service recognized the Jackson Ranch's historical significance in 2024. I spoke with Rosanna Bacha Garza, an anthropology lecturer at the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley and manager of the Community Historical Archaeology Project with schools. I asked her more about Nathaniel Jackson and Matilda Hicks.
Well, Nathaniel Jackson was a white farmer and landowner in Alabama, as you said. And Matilda Hicks was an enslaved woman who was purchased by Nathaniel Jackson's father in Georgia in 1804. When Nathaniel's father purchased Matilda, she was only 4 years old, and Nathaniel was 6 years old. I had theorized that Nathaniel and Matilda grew up together as children on Nathaniel's father's Georgia plantation. I believe that Nathaniel and Matilda developed a close friendship and eventually grew up to have their family together. But in February of 1857, Nathaniel and Matilda and their children, grandchildren, and significant others embarked upon this 900-plus mile journey from their home in Alabama and headed toward Mexico.
So how do historians know that they sheltered runaway enslaved people?
Well, historians have come to know the story of the Jackson family through family stories that have been passed down through the generations. Earlier historians in the Rio Grande Valley, like let's say back in the 1960s and 1970s, had conducted oral history interviews with the grandchildren of Nathaniel and Matilda. And those grandchildren of Nathaniel and Matilda had heard firsthand of these adventures of the Jackson family directly from those who made the 900-mile overland journey to the Rio Grande from Alabama.
Well, you're the person who, I understand, worked with the National Park Service, put this on their radar. You saw the application process go through and be approved. What was that like for you?
It was very exciting to have been called for this task because this National Underground Railroad Network to Freedom program was legislation that was passed in 1998. And since that time, the National Park Service has been conducting Scholars Roundtable events, and then I was invited to be on the one that they were conducting in 2020. And so my research of the Jackson family, for example, got their attention, and therefore, I was invited to participate. And so, of course, I had recommended that this property be placed on the map. And so then by December of 22, I was asked by the National Park Service to submit an application specifically to put the Jackson Ranch Church property on the map. The application process was quite intense, and the National Park Service people were quite helpful. And by January 15th of this year, I was able to submit the application. And then last month in April, we received the fantastic news that the Jackson Ranch Church and Martin Jackson Cemetery have been adopted officially onto the Underground Railroad National Network to Freedom program.
Well, congratulations. This is a rare designation, as you said, in Texas. Is that why it's such a big deal, or what do you think it means?
Being selected onto the National Network to Freedom program is a big deal for many reasons. But in particular, to this family, it recognizes the risky and clandestine efforts put forth by the members of the Jackson Ranch family, as they were a benevolent, spiritual group of people who displayed care and compassion for self-emancipators on their quest for freedom in Mexico. Now that we are well into the 21st century, and we see the descendants of Nathaniel and Matilda are not only acknowledging their rich history, but they are embracing it and celebrating it. And that is awesome. So having this Network to Freedom designation will bring more family members back to visit the property, and will also bring other interested community members and tourists to actually stand on the church grounds and feel the presence of those who went before them.
We will have more on the Jackson Ranch at texasstandard.org. We've been talking with Roseanne Bacha Garza, anthropology lecturer at UTRGV and manager of the Community Historical Archaeology Project with schools. Roseanne, thank you so much for this time, and congratulations again.
Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Texas Mutual Insurance Company, a workers' compensation provider that's been caring for hardworking Texans for over 30 years. More at texasmutual.com/expert partner.
It's the Texas Standard. I'm Laura Rice. The myth of the cowboy was grown deep in the heart of Texas. But for decades, so was the erroneous mainstream image of what a real cowboy looked like. That image often excluded women, queer people, Mexican-American vaqueros, and of course, black cowboys. In the rodeo world of the 1970s, black cowboys tested their skills and competed at black rodeos. Back in 2024, photos and moments from one holiday rodeo came to light after being packed away for decades. They were released in a book called Juneteenth Rodeo, with stories and images of events, attendees, and cowboys of those rodeos here in Texas. The photographer behind these images is journalist and writer Sarah Bird. David Brown spoke with her when the book was published.
These images, as I understand it, taken by you decades ago, well, were they just packed away under your bed?
Precisely. No. So I just fell in love with black rodeos in the late 70s and went to as many as I can in these tiny little rural outposts, Plum, Egypt. And I would bring it back to Austin. As you said, there was not a lot of awareness of black cowboys at that point. So, my friends and fellow graduate students would go, I didn't know there were black cowboys. And as you know, I mean, that's the sign you got a story. This was an untold story. These were the unseen images. And I was on fire about getting the book published to share with the world this remarkable, what apparently was news. And at that point, no interest in black cowboys. Unlike today, there was tremendous resurgence of interest. So I was told, no, and hell no.
Wow.
Multiple rejections. So I packed them away. My heart was broken. My bank account was broken. This was back in the days when, as you recall, photography was both laborious and expensive, and I just ran out of money. So I put them away until there they might have stayed forever and ever had it not been for a worldwide pandemic.
And then a rediscovery of some of these photos. Tell us a little bit about the images that you captured. You called them renegade rodeos, and along with the Juneteenth rodeo, there were many that you attended at the time that wouldn't fit the definition of typical rodeo as many people think of it.
Yeah, that's what, as a newcomer to Texas, I fell in love with all the state's oddities, and one being rodeos, but not mainstream rodeos, not professional rodeos, which I found not too interesting. But the, offbeat rodeos, like I photographed, and Chariota is not necessarily rodeos, but gorgeous spectacles, and Native American rodeos, kids rodeos, old-timers rodeos, gay rodeos, girls rodeos, as they were called then, prison and police rodeos. So I was just fascinated by the worlds that sprang up around the rodeo arena. That's what I was mostly interested in photographing. And through them, I found what I ultimately came to think of as the best of them all, which was the black rodeos.
Sarah, I think a lot of folks think of you as more writer, perhaps, than
Absolutely.
photographer. This book seems very different from a lot of your past work. For those who perhaps aren't that familiar with your portfolio, could you compare this with the rest of your work?
Oh, that's, you're the first person to have asked me that. It's night and day. Frankly, I've really enjoyed working with the visual instead of the verbal, just as a change of pace. I mean, I've put in, 50 years of typing. My hands are tired. So it was just a lot of fun to look at these, essentially completed work, which I was editing. And, how much easier that is to just mess around with something that is already there. In writing novels, there's always this confidence problem about, is this worth anything? Is this an idea worth pursuing? Is this an idea worth spending 3 years of my life on? But with these photos, from the first moment I pulled them out from under the bed after over 40 years and saw them, there's just no doubt in my mind that this was a piece of history that had to be returned to the people who had created it.
In radio, we often like to say that the pictures are better, but one of the challenges here is trying to communicate what it was that you saw through the lens and was ultimately printed onto that negative and the paper stock. When you look at these pictures today, what do you see?
What I see, David, is joy. I just see this kind of vibrance. And I had, as I mentioned, I've been on the trail. I've been to lots and lots of rodeos. And these, from the first instant I set foot in a Black Rodeo, they electrified me. They were so much more alive, so much more vibrant, and so much more damn fun. And I feel like I captured that. And, not to say that there wasn't intense and very superb competition, but everyone had a good time. And it was a celebration of each other. It was a celebration of them being together and a celebration of what at that point was their livelihood by and large. The competitors came from rural backgrounds. They probably were riding horses that they had broken, and, they knew how to rope and brand and dope and dehorn steers. So it was a celebration of them and their world and their ability to survive and ultimately have a better time than anybody else.
Sarah, there's an afterword by another author who has a special connection to Black Rodeos. Can you tell us who he is? And
Demetrius Pearson. He's a professor at the University of Houston, and he has written specifically about, which was astonishing to me when I discovered his monograph, he's written about what is called the Soul Circuit. And this is essentially the rodeos that I photographed, which were in about a 150-mile radius of Houston in these very, very tiny towns, Egypt, Plum, El Campo. And he had written about, went back and did a lot of research on these rodeos. He was, the ideal person to write the afterword.
What are you hoping to do with these pictures and the book? What is it that you are trying to accomplish getting these pictures out there?
I feel it's my duty to return them to the communities that created this unbelievable, unforgettable world. And hopefully the participants, but maybe their families, their children, their grandchildren, will be able to see what cool cowboys and cowgirls their grandfathers and grandmothers were, and aunts and uncles. I made it a real effort. It was really important to me to name as many of my subjects as I could. And so before printing, I posted all as many photographs as I could on social media. And to my astonishment, I heard back from sons and daughters of some of the subjects. And in one memorable case, one of my greatest informants was a fellow named Randy McCullough, who was in a lot of the photographs. And he was my major informant. Many times I only knew nicknames because that was how it was in Black Rodeo. And then I shared the photos with Larry Callis at the Black Cowboy Museum in Rosenberg, Texas. And he, to my utter delight, informed me that I essentially had at least 3 champions, photographs of 3-4 champions. And that was completely thrilling to know I had the great Murda Steitman, who's called the Jackie Robinson of Black Rodeo. And he's in several of my photographs, not as a competitor, but to extend fellowship to his fellow riders and competitors and share wisdom and tactics and help them rosin up their riggins.
It's a fascinating account and one that has been rescued from perhaps oblivion. I mean, these pictures were just gone, and now they are back. We've been speaking with Texas writer and photographer Sarah Bird about her latest book, Juneteenth Rodeo. We're going to have links to more, including pictures, texasstandard.org. Sarah, thanks so much for joining us, and again, congratulations.
Thank you, David. This has been a sheer delight.
It's not just about the brisket or the ribs or the sausage or even the sides. It's the culture and people who are passionate about it. Where there's smoke, there's Daniel Vaughn, Texas Monthly Barbecue Editor. Join us next Thursday on the Texas Standard.
Support for Where There's Smoke comes from HEB.
It's the Texas Standard. I'm Laura Rice. The first Black-owned bookstore we know of opened in 1843 in New York. Now there are more than 100 around the country, and since the early days of their establishment, Black-owned bookstores have taken on a new level of cultural significance. In many cases, they're not just places to buy books, they're also spaces of activism, resistance, and community. This history is the subject of a 2025 book called Black Owned by Shar Adams. She's a reporter with NBC News, and she's been following Black-owned bookstores for years. David Brown spoke to Shar back when the book was published.
Your book opens focusing on a gentleman named David Ruggles. Tell us about David Ruggles. Who was he and why begin with him?
He is the first known owner of a Black-owned bookstore. He opened his shop, and he was a major figure in the Underground Railroad. He actually helped to bring Frederick Douglass to freedom, right?
Wow.
And so he and his bookstore kind of set the foundation for what a Black-owned bookstore is.
When did the idea to write this book first come to you? Was there an event or something that sparked your special interest in this?
Yeah, so back in 2018, I read an article in The Atlantic by Joshua Clark Davis, and he basically highlighted how Black-owned bookstores were targeted by the FBI back in the 1960s. And so I read that story and I wanted to know more, right? And so that is how this book came about, wanting to know people's business, basically.
I like how you put that. Yeah. But that must have been a really challenging process of doing the research and gathering those stories. How did you go about doing that?
Yeah, so I tracked down every currently living bookseller from the 1960s I could find. And I've worked as a journalist now for over a decade. And so it was just basically putting all of those skills to use, right? So it was tracking down booksellers, like researching, right? So it was a lot of work. It took a lot of time, but it was my passion.
I was going to say, this really sounds like a passion
for this project.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. No. I truly say that my passion carried me through many long nights of writing and researching.
If you go to booksellers and ask for a recommendation, they're quick to give you a long list. And it's my understanding that you've talked with a lot of Black booksellers about their own recommendations. What were some of the top titles that you heard about?
Yes. Oh, man. So that was a fun project, right? It was fun. And so the top books were, of course, the biography of Malcolm X and Assata Shakur. And I believe that there are a few books by James Baldwin as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we have a wide range on that list, actually.
What about the number of Black-owned bookstores in Texas? You have any sense of how many are here in the Lone Star State and how it might compare with other states?
Oh, man. So I know that here in Dallas and Fort Worth, there are two, and a third that will be reopening.
Wow.
Yes, there is a Black Pearl down in Austin, and I believe that there are 3 in Houston. So I would say, like, in total, there are or will be about 7 in Texas, which is amazing because, like, most Black-owned bookstores, they like kind of have the title of being the sole bookstore in their like state or their city. And so it's such a blessing to have 7 here in Texas. I think that the state that has the most is it is a tie, I think, between New York and California. Yeah.
That would make sense.
Tie
Thinking
there.
of population. In fact.
Yes.
Yep. Right. What do you see as the future of Black-owned bookstores in the U.S.? Do you suspect that they will become more relevant in the future, or how do you see that playing out?
Yeah, I have actually talked to booksellers about this, and people are passionate. So I feel like we'll see more, right? More Black-owned bookstores, but I think that the focus will be on doing more than just selling books, right? So I think we'll see more Black-owned bookstores that are also cafes and like co-working spaces, right? So I think that the idea of a quote Black bookstore and more will be the future here.
Shar Adams is a reporter with NBC News and author of the new book, Black-Owned. Shar, thanks so much for joining us on the show, and congratulations on the new book.
Yes, thank you.
We're out of time for today's program, but you can keep up with the news 24/7 at texasstandard.org and look for us on social media at Texas Standard. Our producers and reporters include Sarah Ash, Shelley Brisbane, Michael Marks, and Sean Saldana. Raul Alonso is our digital producer. Leah Scarpelli is our director, and Casey Cheek is our technical director. The Texas Standard's summer interns are Portia Goyens and Charlie Sharp. The managing editor of Texas Standard is Gabrielle Munoz, and our executive producer is Rhonda Fanning. I'm Laura Rice, and thank you for spending part of your Juneteenth holiday with us. We'll be back on Monday with more on this year's Juneteenth celebrations. We hope you can join us. For now, from me and the entire Texas Standard team, we wish you a wonderful weekend.
Philanthropic support for Texas Standard comes from Casey and Scott O'Hare, the Winkler Family Foundation, Lynn Dobson and Greg Woldridge, Adrian Killam, and the George Huntington family. Would your company or organization like to be a sponsor as well? Contact your local station for opportunities within your community. For statewide sponsorships, visit TexasPublicMediaNetwork.com.